state that they are military-style weapons. Guess what? Miller case. They kicked out Miller. They found against him with his sawed-off shotgun because it was not a military-style weapon. So which is it, honey? Do you support Miller, or do you think Miller was bunk? Because if you think Miller was bunk, then you have to throw the whole opinion out, and then you basically have to say that any law infringing upon Second Amendment is unconstitutional. If you accept Miller, well, then you have to say that you can restrict non-military style firearms, but military style are hands-off because, well, the Miller opinion says so. The Second Amendment doesn't specify. What it does state is that because there is a military, there is a police force, there are state-level militias, and there's the federal standing army, and the governments have these weapons of force. They have these people to employ as though they're weapons of force, these means of coercion, armed coercion, that the people have a right to self-defense against that. They have a right to defend against the possibility and the guard against the possibility of the government turning tyrannical. As long as the people are armed, there's a lessened chance that the armed militia will be turned against the people and used to oppress them. That is the purpose behind the Second Amendment. And then, of course, it also goes into the fact that you have the Second Amendment because it allows you to protect all your other rights, allows you to protect your neighbor, and if we are hit with an external threat or even a large internal threat, you can muster with the rest of your neighbors and defend your neighborhood and your own home and your own state and our nation against that threat because you have your own arms with which to defend. That is the purpose behind the Second Amendment. So I don't know what school she went to, and I don't know who's dumb enough to believe her gum flapping, but I could see this case going higher in the courts and her being very easily overturned. I just wonder who the lawyer is that argued for the plaintiff, because evidently he needs to go and maybe have a behind the scenes sit down with the people who argued the Heller case and the Chicago case, the McDonald case, and find out, exactly how they did it, what references they used, because maybe he needs to rewrite his tort a little bit there. But yeah, there's a federal judge acting dumb. And then, of course, if you go and look at Eric Reed's article, he actually cites the facts surrounding the use of these, in quotes, assault-type weapons or military-style weapons, and their use in not only mass shootings but killing in general of fellow human beings in an offensive capacity, and compares that to statistics with other firearms and other weapons, including improvised weapons, bludgeoning type weapons like rocks, hammers, things like that. So there's another little level of ridiculousness. Evidently Justice Blake is legislating from the bench and trying to change the Constitution instead of supporting and defending it as she should. So there's that. I can go on about all kinds of other Second Amendment issues, and I'll probably come back to that a little bit later in the show. But I do want to segue into some military news. We were discussing on the roundtable last night, where I was a guest panelist. We talked about the goings-on in Iraq and the Middle East, and then we also talked a couple other issues. And one thing that I'm kind of happy didn't come up, given the the odd makeup of those panel discussions where we tend to get off topic for a little bit and then draw it back in, is we really did not discuss Chelsea Bradley Manning. Okay, I have several friends who are either military or veterans, and I'm sure that some of them are listening to this, as well as some of my other listeners who are pro-military, and that name is probably, you're probably using every ounce of your composure not to smash your coffee cup about right now, just from the mention of that name. But have you seen the latest? From the news, the ridiculous. They're transferring Manning out of the military prison system and into a civilian federal prison. Why? Because he's not receiving his hormone therapy. The female hormones to kind of change and start the procedure for a transgender operation. They're not letting him have those medications in the military prison because they don't fall under a military medical system. They don't. You don't get some, burly infantry guy who goes on sick call one day and says, I need to start hormone medication so that I can become a girl. It just doesn't happen. Now, if Manning wants to have his operation, my personal opinion is he does his time, sits in jail, rots, takes his punishment, and when he gets out, he can go pay for his own operation. It is, in reality, cosmetic surgery supported by hormone therapy or taking drugs, taking steroids, for another term for it. So that's what he wants to do. He could do that on his own once his sentence is completed. And he could pay for it out of his own pocket. Because I don't even think Obamacare covers nose jobs as far as elective surgery goes. I'd have to check. I'd have to reread that multi-thousand-page atrocity. But I know the military medical system, it actually only covers, it will cover one cosmetic surgery during your career. I do know females who had breast augmentations. I do know soldiers who have had other elective cosmetic surgeries done, but they're allowed one, and what that was used for is kind of practice. And by the way, most of these were done prior to the kickoff of the Iraq War. Once that kind of happened, the surgeons no longer needed the peacetime practice because they started having to do that work for real on soldiers who were injured and disfigured. So they got plenty of practice. But that's where it kind of started, like I said, before the war. And then the policy was one. Well, it's going to take more than one to go through the whole procedure to cosmetically make himself look female, and that's what it is. Because if you were to take Manning's blood after he goes through the whole thing, and sure, you'll find the female hormones in there from the hormone replacement therapy, but if you check his DNA, he's still going to be an XY, not an XX. So genetically, at the root of everything, he will still be male with a cosmetically transformed body, surgically, elective surgery. Now, I know some people sit back and tell me, you're not talking about the psychological aspects. Okay, I'm not a psychologist. I took psychology in college, and I understand a little bit of it. I've got a lot of books around my place on psychology that I do flip through when I get the chance and get the opportunity, but they're not mine. I have people very close to me who are in the psychology field. And the really strange thing is, the majority of the people I know who in that field, while they understand, well, I shouldn't say understand, they recognize the the mental illness or the mental condition. Illness is probably the wrong term of that transgender thing. Scientifically, at the genetic level, they all acknowledge that technically, even post-operative, they're born the gender they were born with, because you look at the DNA and it's still either an XX or an XY, period, unless they're a hermaphrodite, and that's just a ball of wax I'm not even going to get into. But yeah, you may have the gender identity disorder. There's something wrong in the brain, but it doesn't change the fact that you were born this certain way, and your genetic code says that you are this. So, take that for what it's worth. Now it's Bradley's body. He can do with it what he wishes once his sentence is complete. He wants to undergo that, fine, go do it. But it's your body, it's also your dime. This is not an actual medical issue. It is not a life-saving thing. So, that's my 2 cents on the Bradley banning. I just can't believe how we're kowtowing to a criminal, a prisoner, convicted criminal. No. It's kind of like grounding your kid for being disruptive and misbehaving, etc., etc., etc. Grounding your kid for a week, and then the next morning you take off and take the kid to the amusement park, to Six Flags, and hand them $100 and tell them to go wild. What kind of grounding is that? What are you teaching them? Nothing. That punishments don't matter. You can do whatever you want. So there's some more news of the weird. Now getting into more military news. Interesting things going on. Lakland Air Force Base. You all remember Lakland, right? Been in the news quite a bit recently. They had a whole bunch of unaccompanied illegal alien minors locked up there while they tried to decide what to do with them. And most of them have moved on. They still have a few of them there. Don't know the exact number, but they've moved a good portion of them into facilities that can take care of the kids more long-term and more comfortably until they can be brought before their deportation hearings, and the process, kind of works its way through. But Lakland is getting a new unit, so to speak. They're standing up a new unit. They're taking some of the units that are already stationed there and kind of remissioning them. But they're gaining a rather large Air Force intelligence unit that's standing up. And that's going to mean a couple thousand more airmen stationed here at Lakland, which is in San Antonio, Texas. And of course that's going to bring military personnel, and that's going to generate more jobs on the outside, from people that are contract in or just set up services or whatever. So of course that's going to increase the economic conditions around San Antonio, which are not that bad. It's one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country already. So, it's some good news for that as far as the economy goes. But military news, standing up this new unit. Of course, this is during a time when they were talking about cutting force sizes and restructuring and everything like that. But this force restructure is actually increasing one unit, setting up one unit. That's going to mean an increase in numbers. So that's some interesting stuff coming out of the Air Force. Meanwhile, the combination of Army personnel and Marine personnel are going to form a unit of 130 people that are actually going to go boots on the ground in northern Iraq, near the Erbil, Mosul kind of Kurdish Green area. And their sole mission is to go in and ensure that humanitarian relief supplies that have been sent in and are continue to be sent into northern Iraq to protect the, not protect, but to provide relief to the Yazidis who are currently under siege from Al-Qaeda in Iraq, otherwise known as, their political arm is known as the Islamic State of Iraq, ISI, or ISIS, or ISIL, or IS, or whatever the current buzz term is for them. They've been around for years and years, and their ISI is to Al-Qaeda what Sinn Féin is to the IRA. It's just their political arm. Their so-called legitimate arm. As legitimate as you really want to believe them to be. But they currently have the Yazidis under siege, and they've done 3 major supply drops, and nobody's sure if these have even gotten to the Yazidis. And of course the bad guys, if they see the drops going in, they're going to surround the humanitarian supplies and not let the Yazidis get to it. They're going to say, come and get it, we'll just take your head off as soon as you get here. So this 130-man contingent is going to go in and ensure that the supplies are getting what they need to go. Sorry. 130 is approximately a company, and that's a big area. I've been there. I don't think a company is enough. I don't care if these are the biggest badass Delta Force dudes out there. 130 of them still is not going to be enough to get that mission done. Just my personal opinion. I haven't looked at all the planning and statistics. If they're just going to one small spot, then sure. But if they're actually going to be looking for the whole across the spectrum, making sure that they're all taken care of, that's a different story. It's going to take a lot more people. But we wish them well on their mission, despite the fact that we know that our glorious Emperor-in-Chief, with his pen and his phone, doesn't have a clue what he's doing, at least on the military aspect. But speaking about military aspects, and speaking of something I mentioned earlier in the show, with 22 veterans a day on average committing suicide, if you know any veterans who might be in danger, who are living in Texas, stationed in Texas, or may relocate to Texas once they finish up their terms of service, well, there is help out there. Not just suicide hotlines, but all kinds of benefits out there. And though the VA may be stuck in its own quagmire of corruption and inefficiency, there are state-level agencies. Most states have something, but in Texas, we do have a state-level agency that's standing by to help navigate that quagmire and get the veterans the help they need. So, take a listen to Governor Perry.
Our men and women in uniform have valiantly served and profoundly sacrificed for our nation. That's why Texas is expanding staffing at the Texas Veterans Hotline with experts trained to help veterans deal with the VA. Callers can learn what they qualify for, and in the most urgent cases, TVC experts will work directly with the VA to help veterans get the answers and care they need and deserve. Call the hotline at 1-800-252-VETS. Thank you.
Yep. So, hopefully you wrote down that number. I used to have it memorized, but I've got so many other things that have since jumped into my little scrambled brain here and started bouncing around. One of those things, of course, is I would really need to get the exact number or the quoted number, but it's something I kind of heard in passing, so I need to confirm or deny. So right now this is rumor, folks. Rumor coming just from me. So you can believe it, or you can look into it and find out what the whole truth is. But evidently